Welcome to episode 3 of the College Casual Show. We had a wild weekend of college football last weekend. Big upsets occurred. I mean, you know it's a good weekend of college football when parity happens. And this weekend was great because of the interesting fact of two teams going to a separate country in Dublin, Ireland, go into play, kind of put the college football game out there for the world to see. And parity. It honestly, it is great for college football that Georgia Tech beat the 10th ranked team in the country in Florida State. I believe it was a great thing for college football because it showed that because let's put it into a mind of a native in Dublin, thinking, oh, well, Florida State seems pretty good. I mean, all the odds makers are saying Florida State should win by a lot. They're the 10th ranked team in the country. 10 must mean something. I mean, because they probably don't know how rankings work in college football and how the hierarchy works. Most people probably don't because they don't pay attention to college football. Why we're going to Dublin, for example. So, and then Georgia Tech beats them. And might I add, it was how Georgia Tech beat them. It wasn't the fact that Georgia Tech had to come back down from like 10 points. No, they actually kind of dominated that first half and the second half. It really took kind of not heroic effort, but just like a lot out of Florida State to even have this game tied. Because when you look at how Georgia Tech ran the football, 190 yards of total running from the football, and it was from a multitude of players. I mean, Jamal Haynes King, the quarterback, he is I want to say that if it weren't for Haynes King and the plays he made late, it wasn't the fact that he played an overall great game. It was the fact that he made plays timely. That was kind of the biggest thing on the Georgia Tech side that I noticed is he would go run off for 10, 11 yards, get that on a clip, and it was timely. Jamal Haynes, I mean, that first half from Georgia Tech really kind of set the tone of what that game was going to be. Georgia Tech in the first half was running outside breaking runs, so like outside zone runs. And Florida State on the first drive stops it completely. Excuse me, no. Florida State goes and drives on the first drive, runs the crap out of the rock because they get it's 5 plays in. They're near, I think, about the 40-yard line. Then they run it 6 straight times. And boom, right there, touchdown. And then they do the swing pass to get the 2-point conversion. It was a trick play. And it really kind of showed, from Mike Norvell's perspective, that he was kind of trying to set a point that Florida State is still the same team, even though there's a lot of new faces. There are a lot of new players on this team. And kind of partly the reason why they lost this game is because there was so much roster turnover from Florida State, and it's just a bunch of different pieces trying to mesh. I did not like this scheduling from Florida State going into a conference game, but again, you got to take care of business. But we'll get into why I think Florida State lost totally. But and then Georgia Tech comes down and they respond. It was a response, and the way they ran the football, as I said, outside zone runs, and they really got their athletes outside. They put them in space, and they got them outside, and kind of demonstrated that their speed was kind of matching Florida State, and then also that they could pound the rock. They owned the offensive line up front, or the defensive line. And also, I would like to add, Florida State's defensive alignment maybe needed an adjustment. I kind of sensed that they had an adjustment in the second half, but it wasn't very clear. It was clear in the third quarter, but in the fourth quarter, Georgia Tech then just went back to doing what they did best, and that's how they ended up winning the game. We're going to go to Florida State side of things, though. The play calling offensively was very conservative on DJU's part. He did take some deep shots here and there, but it wasn't downfield passing like it should have been. Because in the first half, DJU goes 12 of 14 for 96 yards, and get this, negative zero point 0.1 air yards per play. That was the average air yards he would have when he threw the ball. That's not good. When you have a very experienced quarterback, a quarterback that's going into his fourth season, went from Clemson, starting at Clemson, fourth season as a starter, excuse me. So he's went from Clemson to Oregon State those 2 years, and now he's at Florida State. DJU was just too conservative, and there were times where it was on DJU because there's a 3rd and 4 where I believe it's in the first half. They have trips on the right, and then they have one on the outside to his left, and then he has his halfback on the left of him. It's 3rd and 4. There's a 6-man blitz coming towards DJU. Now, there's one thing that you do need either to change pre-snap for DJU. You need to either, hey, set your halfback or either full slide your line to the place you kind of want to throw the football, and then have your halfback kind of chip block or block the linebacker that's incoming on the blitz. Or you can have him either block and release, or you can just have him just fill the space that the linebacker did. Now, that's what DJU did. What he didn't account for, though, is the corner knew that was coming. So the guy on the wide receiver on the left, on the far left, he goes and he kind of just runs him off as if it was by design. The cornerback notices it. He jumps on the ball to the halfback and he gets him for a 2-yard gain, and it was a 4th down. That was a big play by Georgia Tech because Florida State was kind of moving the ball there, and then boom, stops. And I believe they missed the field goal. No, that was Georgia Tech. Excuse me. So then what he doesn't see, though, he doesn't look to his right. If he does, he sees that the inside receiver, not the slot receiver, but the inside receiver, right next to the slot, has a slant route that just breaks open, and the corner does not cover it well at all, and he's wide open. If he just throws, DJU just looks right. He has it right there. He throws it on time. Boom, it's right there. He's got to look at leveraging. And the way the corner was leveraged pre-play, you could tell that if the inside route was going to be a slant route or an in route, he would have no shot at getting there unless he was just a freak of nature. And he didn't get there, and you could tell that if DJU just looks that way, boom, he's got a 4-yard, 5-yard gain, maybe even breaks off. So it's not just the play calling that was conservative in the first half, it was also just the decision making from DJU. It was not the lack of reading the field, but the lack of seeing the vision of the field. Because I don't think there's an issue with the reading of the field, because if you see that last drive Florida State has, it's boom, it's intermediate throw after intermediate throw in the middle of the field, might I add, where you have to throw over guys at a certain velocity, you have to pick the right pitch throw. It was a great drive from DJU, and it showcased what he could be and what he could do, and that was really frustrating to watch as just a neutral college football fan, to just watch him be like, dude, this is the stuff you should have been doing earlier in the game. You should be getting. Now, you usually first game want to have somewhat conservative play calling, at least in the first quarter. Second quarter, that's when you want to kind of flex just a little bit before the half to get more confidence into your quarterback, especially a first-year starter at his new school. And they just didn't do that. They did not. It was very conservative play calling from Florida State. And I think that's what's going to, when they look back at the tape, they're going to look back and be like, we should have done this here or we should have done this there. I mean, and that's where they really lost the game is just on offense. They did not play consistently on offense. And I think that's where that's really going to hurt them. I think though that's the first game of the season. They got Boston College next week. I think they figure it out during the season. For Florida State, they're not out of the playoff though. A lot of people are going to write them off, be like, "Oh my gosh, Florida State, they dropped the ball like we all thought they would after that undefeated season. They weren't as good, but it's a lot of roster turnover from last year, and there's not the same NFL talent that there was on their roster that was from last year. It's a lot of new talent, lots of transfer portal guys. Um, and for Florida State, I'm not, if you're Mike Norvell, you shouldn't be worried because you can still win the conference and that gets you an auto bid to the playoff. So their season's not over. Moving on. So we're going to go to old segment. So every week we're going to have like very important games of the week, and they're usually self-explanatory, but I'll explain why they're important. Um, but for week one, usually the headline games are always, you just kind of know which ones are important. So we're going to start it off with Georgia versus Clemson. And this kind of goes into a what if scenario because Georgia is, I believe, a two touchdown. Yeah, I think it's like they're a 13 and a half point favorite. Okay, so Georgia is a 13 and a half point favorite against Clemson. I think this is a fair line. I do think, for me, I believe Georgia needs to flex this game, really show that they're still on top of the college football world because right now there's a lot of discussion between Ohio State and Georgia as who's the best team in the country. And this is for Georgia and Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is really good at having his teams ready for week one. There's not really a question. Remember the Oregon game, Georgia versus Oregon game where Georgia beats them 49-0? Yeah, that was week one. Georgia was ready. That was a talented Oregon team they played up against, and Kirby Smart had them ready for that game. I think it's a great matchup for Georgia to get ready for the SEC, especially that schedule that they have, one of the hardest schedules in the conference. I think for Georgia, it is very important that they flex and that they get all the kinks out, everything, all the like parts that don't fit, and like just try to make sure it all meshes together really well. Carson Beck, I think that this is the season that he needs to be at his ultimate best, and I think this week he needs to show that. For Clemson, this is really, you gotta like, Clemson's just got to play their A plus plus game. Like their defense has to, they have so much they need to worry about defensively. And then offensively, you just got to be able to move the ball. If you move the ball, make sure that Georgia doesn't have the ball. If the key to this game for Clemson is the time of possession game. You don't want Carson Beck to have all day to be able to pick your defense apart because if that happens and it's 4-and-out after 4-and-out for Clemson's offense, Clemson's losing by 28 or even more if that happens. Clemson's got to keep the time of possession game around 30 to 35 minutes. If they can do that, they have a perfect shot at winning this game. So the key is Clemson's defense has to hold up like really well. They have to play their A++ game, and then on offense, they just have to move the ball. Even if they get to, let's say, the 45-yard line and they get to fourth down, Dabo's a really aggressive coach. He may go for that, but it's also the field position game that Clemson probably should want to play how they should want to play this game. And Clemson's going to have slow, methodical drives because you don't want like a lot of one-play touchdown kind of plays where it's just a bomb, boom, Clemson's makes an explosion of points. You don't want that because then that gives Carson Beck more time to pick your defense apart. Just you don't want that. You want to keep Carson Beck off the field, especially with how talented he is. Now that he has a season under his belt, I wouldn't want to mess with that if I were Clemson. So I think that's the key for Clemson. That's kind of the first big game that's at 11:30. It's at 12. That's at noon. A part of the first slate of games of Saturday. Then we got Miami against Florida. This one is important for perception for Miami because last year they were one of the more talented teams in their conference. They just couldn't execute very well. I have them. I want to say I had them 21st in my poll, and there's a lot of polls that have them up higher, and it's because of the talent. And for good reason. Miami, though, is one of the more talented they've been. Mario Cristobal has been able to recruit like crazy at Miami. He has a lot of talent from top to bottom. But the other thing is, so is Florida, but Florida is just a bunch of talent just kind of out there. And it's kind of this Miami and Florida are similar teams where it's lots of talent all around. It's just whether they're going to mesh and whether they can execute. Florida last season lost 5 games in a row. For Florida, this game is just kind of a do or die game where if they don't win this game, it's not going to look good for Florida this season because of the schedule they have. The schedule they have is one of the hardest, it is the hardest schedule in the country, actually. Objectively, every metric has Florida's schedule the hardest, and there's great reason for that. They have to go on the road multiple times against top 25 teams. Very tough schedule. And so, but for Miami, this is the kind of game where you go into the swamp, and if you get this big win in the swamp, and kind of solidify that you are going to be consistently good. That is the key for Miami here is you want to be consistent. You want to start executing consistently. Unlike last year where they lose games that they definitely shouldn't have. They should have been like 9-3 in the regular season. Instead, they were 7-5 because there were some games where they just blew it. I mean, the Georgia Tech game last year, it was horrible. We all know that game. I mentioned it in the top 25 preseason poll. So for Miami, this is a big game because it will really show what Miami is about. If they go into the swamp, picture this. If they go into the swamp and they beat Florida by 20, what will we think about Miami? Wow, that's a tough, true road game to start the season. Going on the road to the swamp of the first game of the season where you're still trying to figure things out, especially under a new coach. He's still getting acclimated to the program, kind of setting the bar, setting the standard in the program. This would be a big win for Mario Cristobal, especially if they win big. And they're not favored, according to ESPN Analytics. They have Miami at a 42.7% chance to win. So, and that's probably because they're playing in the swamp. It is a very tough environment to play in. All right, moving on. We got USC at LSU. They play on Sunday. These are very two similar teams. Last year they were very similar. Both their defenses were atrocious. Let up a lot of points, but then they also scored a lot of points. For USC and LSU, it will be interesting to see how both their defenses hold up against both of these teams. I think for USC, getting Miller Moss, I mean, like there's so many similarities between these two teams. Both new starting quarterbacks after very talented starting quarterbacks leave for the NFL. And then lots of their talent is now gone on the outside. I think that's very similar programs. And then also that their defense, they're both getting new defensive coordinators. It very, like, just two very similar teams, and it'll be interesting to see how they play out. I think for USC, it is just important that they have an average defense. For LSU, I think they're so talented on defense that it's just in terms of tackling. I mean, that's all it is for LSU is tackling and then defensive linemen, because that was what was messed up last year in schematics. Um, and for offensively, I think it's less of an importance that they stress Miller Moss for USC. Because last year in the Holiday Bowl, he played really well. And all throughout the offseason, they're saying that Miller Moss is a better fit for USC. He's going to run the offense more like how Lincoln Riley likes to run the offense. No knock against Caleb Williams. It's just that he likes to go outside the system and really make plays on his own because he was that good. For Miller Moss, he's going to be more methodical, play the offense as Lincoln Riley would like the offense to be played. And if we know anything about Lincoln Riley, if Miller Moss has a really good year, he will be in the Heisman. He'll be a Heisman candidate hopeful. For Lincoln Riley, he always has. If the offense is really good, his player is always in the Heisman conversation. For LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, I think it's important that you get him kind of accustomed to LSU football and just like get him ease into the game. You don't want to rush him in there and kind of like in terms of play calling, give him like deep shots. You want to give him more like 5 to 10 yards of passing plays that get him just in rhythm, into the swing of things. And then later in the game, I think that's when you kind of want to like broaden the scopes and really flex like how good your team is in terms of offense. That's another important game. A neutral site game, USC, LSU. Multiple neutral site games, Georgia, Clemson, USC, LSU. And then I have the most important game of the week. This is my casual prediction. This is going to be the most important game of the week and might be the most important game of the year. Might. Actually, it very well could be. It is up there with Ohio State against Oregon, Ohio State versus Penn State, Georgia versus Texas. It's up there in terms of magnitude of game. Ohio State and Michigan. That's another big one, obviously. But this game, most important game of the week, my casual prediction is Notre Dame versus Texas, or Texas A&M, yes. This is a very, very vital game to what we will expect from both of these teams this year. Because now with the 12-team playoff and how it is set up, Notre Dame, all they have to do is go 12-0, and they have an automatic bid to the playoff. I think this game will really show if Notre Dame goes into Kyle Field, one of the toughest places to play in the country, and they pour it on to Texas A&M, and they really just kind of show the country why they were ranked number 7, because I think it was a fair ranking for how talented they are and how great of a coach Marcus Freeman is. For Texas A&M, this game is going to be really tough, especially with your new head coach Mike Elko. He's still trying to probably get acclimated into Texas A&M way, get into the culture of things. For Texas A&M, it's really hard to settle in because of the boosters, because of everything that goes on at Texas A&M and the expectations that if you throw money everywhere, boom, stuff will go in the right direction. I think for Texas A&M, if they lose, but they show a strong showing, like it's a 3-point game, and they lose by 3, 1 possession, where it's really just a toss-up of who wins it. I think that's important for Texas A&M, and that would be a great confidence builder for the new look SEC. And for Notre Dame, if they get past this game and then they beat Texas A&M, their schedule sets up so well. We did go over that in the preseason poll of how easy Notre Dame's schedule is. And if you look at it, Notre Dame has the opportunity to go 12-0 because they have two, I believe it's 2 or 3 true road games, and then they have everything else is at home or it's on a neutral field because they have to go on the road to Kyle Field. They have to go on the road to USC. I believe it's 2 true road games. Insane schedule for Notre Dame. Um, and then everything else is at home. They get Florida State at home, which is a very important one. So this game, I believe, will really set up what goes on for college football and how the 12-team first year of the 12-team playoff will set up, because it will set precedent of what to expect, and also for this first year of the 12-team playoff. This is a very important year. I will be saying that multiple times this season of how important it is that that team, or how the 12-team playoff, the first year of it being implemented, is going to kind of set precedent for the rest of the college football world. Because if, let's say, Notre Dame gets into the playoff and it's because they get a signature win here at Texas A&M and they really solidify, they go on a deep run, they run through Florida State, they run through USC, and they go 12-0, and they're that 5th spot into the in the college football playoff, that will kick out either an SEC team or a Big Ten team that's either 10-2 or 9-3. That was kind of looking for it, and they have a really hard schedule. So it will really set precedent on what for future playoff and what maybe needs to change in terms of rules, because we're still in the trial period. Lots of things could change. We could very well go to a 14-team playoff in the next couple of years because they may see that, like, oh, we need to add a couple teams because, well, we still keep the conference title games intact and their importance. They would rather have more SEC and Big Ten teams because they want to satisfy the SEC and Big Ten, because they don't want them to branch off and do whatever they want. They don't want that to happen. They want to keep the SEC and Big Ten happy. So for the SEC and Big Ten, you're really rooting for Texas A&M here, because you do not want Notre Dame to go 12-0. If Notre Dame goes 10-2, they're not making the playoff. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. A 9-3 SEC team is going to get in over because of scheduling and how tough their schedule is. Anyway, so those are my big games. Let me give you my prediction for each game and who I believe is going to win. Georgia versus Clemson. I believe Georgia has the edge here. I think they win by 20. I think Carson Beck is just going to be too good for Clemson, and because the fact that Clemson has to play their best game against Georgia in week 1, might I add, it's just going to be really tough for Clemson to overcome that. I think Georgia wins in that neutral site. Miami versus Florida. I think Miami will have some hard struggles first half, but they'll get over it. They'll adjust in the second half. I think they're a very talented team, and they'll show that. And they will beat Florida on the road. They'll get a big win. USC versus LSU. I think Lincoln Riley I think they figure out the defense. I think they become an average defense this season. I think they be better. There's no way you go from last season having one of the worst defenses in the country and having that be the big letdown and be like, okay, we can't, and that have not be fixed by this year. I think that's going to be a very big importance. I think Lincoln Riley will make that his top priority, is a defense that can be competent, and I think that will put them over the edge, because I think Miller Moss and that USC offense and how great Lincoln Riley is at play calling, I think USC will go put over the top against LSU. I think USC wins that game. I think that's a big win for USC moving forward in the new Big Ten. I'll also add Penn State, West Virginia. I didn't have them in my most important games of the week because even though West Virginia could very well be a great team in the Big 12. I think for Penn State, this is more of a routine. They need to act like this is a routine game. That they could just, it's a routine non-conference game. They just go on into Morgantown and beat them. I think that's why I didn't put them in. But I'm going to still share my prediction for that. I think Penn State wins big in Morgantown. They get a big win over West Virginia. And Drew Aller, Nick Singleton will really flex in that game and show how great they are. Also, and then we got Notre Dame versus Texas A&M. For Mike Elko, I don't think he's ready for this kind of magnitude of game yet, especially for week 1. So I do believe Notre Dame's going to win this game. I'm sorry for all my A&M fans, or not my A&M fans, my A&M friends, because I have a lot of them. They all love A&M. It's religion over there in Texas and College Station, but they're going to lose. I'm sorry. It's just too soon to have a non-conference game and have a big win. Even though it's at Kyle Field, I know that place is going to be rocking. It's a night game. Saturday night primetime is going to be there. Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler is going to be there to call the game. It's going to be electric in Kyle Field. I just know that. I can't wait to watch this game because for me it's at 5 a.m. because I'm in a separate country, but I'll get up at 4:40 and I'll be like ready to watch this game, just ready, tuned in. This is I'm so excited for it, but I got Notre Dame. Riley Leonard is just going to be too much for Texas A&M and Marcus Freeman, and what he's setting up in Notre Dame and what he's built in Notre Dame so far is going to be too much for the Aggies this weekend. And so that's my week 1 predictions and also kind of my week 0 wrap up. Besides the other games, FSU versus Georgia Tech was the big headline from week 0. Week 1, I cannot wait for this. This is really the kickoff of college football. We kind of had a little taste of FSU versus Georgia Tech, and then we had SMU versus Nevada and how that game ended. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that college football is back. We had a little taste when the video game came out, College Football 25. We had a little taste of the college football season coming back and how exciting this is going to be. This is a great time to be a college football fan. Just with everything new coming. And these matchups are going to start coming in. These non-conference matchups are going to be more consistent over the years, and they're going to be much more notable games. It's going to be, oh my gosh, it's great for the sport. Can't wait for it. Goodness. So that's the end of episode 3. Episode 4 is going to be a full reaction to the crazy week 1, and then we got week 2 ahead of us, which will be huge. Lots of fun games to cover next week. Excited for it. All right. See y'all. Give me the lights, give me the